Chapter 4. Kimmy staggered back until she hit the tile wall. Panting loudly, she pointed to the water rushing in a broad stream from the shower head. "Kimmy, are you okay?" Deborah cried in alarm. "What is it?" "The water, it's scalding hot," Kimmy told her. The three girls turned off the taps and hurried out, clutching their towels. "Ow, that burned," Kimmy declared, starting to breathe normally. "Should we get the nurse? Are you all right?" Deborah asked, staring at Kimmy's chest and neck, which were scarlet. "I think I'll be okay," Kimmy said, relieved, covering herself with a towel. "It was just such a shock." "We'll have to remember to tell Simmons," Deborah said, and then she added sarcastically, "Maybe he'll get around to fixing it in a year or two." Simmons was one of the Shadyside High custodians. He also drove a school bus. A laid-back young man with a blonde ponytail and Walkman headphones that seemed to be permanently glued to his ears. He wasn't terribly reliable in either job. "Hey, did you drop this?" Ronnie asked. She bent down and picked something shiny off the floor. "Oh, thanks." Kimmy reached out for it. It was her silver megaphone pendant. Her parents had given it to her for her 16th birthday. She struggled to put it back around her neck, which was still red from the scalding shower. "The clasp is loose," she said, frowning. "I really have to get it fixed. Don't want to lose it." The three friends hurriedly got dressed in silence. Hoisting her backpack onto her shoulder, Ronnie sighed and headed for the door, her sneakers thudding heavily on the concrete. "You feeling any better?" Kimmy called after her. "No," was the sullen reply. "This is so exciting," Bobby declared. It was a Friday evening 2 weeks later, and the cheerleaders were boarding the small yellow and black school bus that would take them to the Tigers' first away game. Corky followed her sister onto the bus. She said hi to Simmons, who was slouched in the driver's seat, fiddling with his ponytail. He grunted in reply. Raindrops dotted the windshield. A light rain had started to fall. The sky was a gloomy charcoal color, but not gloomy enough to darken the sisters' moods. They had been working hard for that night, practicing the new routines after school and at home, learning the cheers, working up a few new wrinkles of their own. "Go Tigers!" Bobby yelled, tumbling into a seat near the back. "Go who?" Megan yelled. The bus quickly filled with loud, excited voices, happy laughter. Simmons leaned forward and pulled a handle to close the door. "Hey, where's Miss Green?" Deborah called. Jennifer turned around in the front seat. "She's driving in her own car tonight. She had to take some friends." Kimmy sat in the window seat next to Deborah. She rubbed her hand over the glass, trying to clear the thin film of steam away so that she could see out. "Hey, Simmons, how about some air conditioning?" one of the girls yelled. "We're melting back here." Simmons, obviously lost in his own thoughts, ignored the request as usual. He started the bus up and clicked on the headlights. Corky, seated in the aisle beside her sister, turned to stare out their window as the bus backed out of its parking space and headed out of the student parking lot. Rivulets of rainwater ran down the glass, distorting her view. The rain picked up, drumming noisily on the roof of the bus. A gust of wind blew water through the window, which was open an inch or two at the top. Bobby raised herself up and, with great effort, pushed the window shut. "Now we'll suffocate," Corky complained. "Take your pick. Suffocate or drown," Bobby told her. "Tough choice," Corky replied. "Go Tigers!" someone yelled. Someone started a cheer, and everyone joined in. "Tigers are yellow, Tigers are black. Push 'em back, push 'em back, push 'em way back." Bobby smiled at her sister. She settled back in her seat, happy and excited. The past 2 weeks had been difficult. The other girls were aloof at first, even resentful. But Bobby was confident that she and Corky had won most of them over. Kimmy and Deborah were still cold to them, still acted as if they were unwanted intruders, but she felt sure that she and Corky would eventually win those two over too. As the bus rattled down Park Drive away from the school, the rain pounded harder. The trees and shrubs exploded in a white flash of lightning. The thunder seemed to crack right above them. Heather and Megan began chanting, "Rain, rain, go away." Jennifer turned in her seat to face the rest of the cheerleaders. "It's not going to last," she announced. "It's just a flash storm. They said on the radio it's going to pass quickly." Another loud thunderclap made two girls scream. Everyone else laughed. The big wiper scraped noisily, rhythmically across the windshield, which was covered with a curtain of white steam. Simmons didn't seem to mind, or notice the poor visibility. Holding on to the seat back, Jennifer stood up. "I have a few announcements to make," she called out, shouting to be heard over the driving rain. Kimmy and Deborah were giggling loudly about something. Jennifer waited for them to get quiet. First of all, unless it's still drizzling, we'll do the fire baton routine at halftime as planned, Jennifer said, cupping her hands together like a megaphone. Simmons made a sharp turn onto Canyon Road, causing Jennifer to topple back into her seat. She pushed herself back up, flashing the driver an annoyed look, which, of course, he didn't see. If the storm doesn't blow over, Jennifer continued. Oh, no, Corky cried. The fire batons. All eyes turned to the back of the bus. A flash of lightning seemed to outline Corky and her sister. We have to turn around, Corky declared, shouting over the clap of thunder. What? Jennifer called, her face filled with confusion. We have to stop at my house, Corky explained. The fire batons. Bobby and I brought them home to practice. We forgot them. Can we turn around? Several girls groaned, Kimmy the loudest of all. It's only a small detour, Bobby said, coming to her sister's defense. No problem, Jennifer said, her expression troubled. Standing in the aisle beside Simmons, she tapped him hard on the shoulder. No reaction. She tugged his ponytail. We have to make a stop on Fear Street, Jennifer told him. Huh? Fear Street, Jennifer repeated impatiently. Just turn here. Simmons turned the wheel, and the bus skidded into a turn over the wet pavement. Holding on to the seat back, Jennifer turned back to Corky and Bobby. Direct us when we get to Fear Street, okay? The two girls agreed, apologizing again for the detour. Ooh, Fear Street, someone said, uttering a spooky howl. Some other girls laughed. Kimmy made some kind of wisecrack to Deborah, and the two girls giggled together. The rain fell in heavy sheets, driven by unpredictable, powerful wind gusts. For some reason, Simmons sped up. In front of him, the big wipers swam mechanically across the steamy windshield. Jennifer resumed her position in the aisle beside him. I have just a few more announcements to make, she shouted. Staring out the window at the storm, Bobby saw the passing houses and trees grow darker, as if a heavy shadow had lowered itself over them, over the whole world. Trees bent in a strong wind. The rain suddenly shifted and blew against the window, startling Bobby and blocking her view. Up at the front, Jennifer continued with her announcements. Bobby couldn't hear her over the pounding rain, the thunder, the angry rush of wind. Suddenly, Simmons reached out and pulled a lever to open the door. The sound of the rain grew louder. Cold, wet air cut through the bus. Why did he open the door? Corky asked her sister. I guess to see better, Bobby replied thoughtfully. The windshield is totally steamed. Are we near home? The bus sped up. Simmons had his head turned to the open door, his eyes on the cross street, which passed by in a gray blur. Bobby stared hard out the rain-blotted window, trying to read a street sign. Suddenly she realized that something was wrong. The bus. It began to skid. There was no time to scream or cry out a warning. 1 second they were moving along through the rain. The next second they were sliding out of control toward the curb. Whoa, Simmons shrieked over the squeal of tires. The brakes! The tire squeals grew to a roar in Bobby's ears. She covered them with both hands. She tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. The impact was fast and hard. What had they hit? A tree? A rock? The curb? The bus seemed to bounce, to fly up off the road, to bounce again. Staring in horror and surprise at the front, Bobby saw Jennifer's eyes open wide. And then as the bus jolted and spun, she watched as Jennifer flew out the open door. Jennifer's startled scream was drowned out by the squeal of the skidding tires, by the crunch of metal, by the shatter of glass. Chapter 5. It all took a second, maybe less. Bobby blinked, and it was over. The screams swirled around her, surrounding her. She wasn't sure whether she was hearing the squeal of the tires or the cries of the cheerleaders. And then the world tilted on its side. With a silent, choked gasp, Bobby toppled onto Corky, and the two of them, arms flailing helplessly, fell sideways toward the far window, which was now the floor. No time to scream. It only took a microsecond, or so it seemed. The window glass beneath them cracked all the way down the pane like a jagged bolt of lightning, and still the bus bumped and slid, metal grating against pavement, invading their ears. Bobby felt another hard bump. A stab of pain jolted her entire body, made her shake and bounce. And then all movement stopped. Such an abrupt stop. Such a shattering stop. I'm okay, Bobby realized, her first clear thought. She was on top of her sister, their arms and legs tangled. Corky is okay too. Corky stared up at her open-mouthed, her green eyes wide with fear, all sideways. She heard muffled cries, whimpers like frightened puppies. "Oh, man," a loud groan from the front of the bus, from Simmons. Bobby pulled herself up. Simmons was trying to stand, but everything was tilted. Everything was wrong. "Are you okay?" Corky asked in a tiny voice. "Yeah, I think so," Bobby replied uncertainly. "Then get off me!" Corky cried. She sounded so angry it made Bobby laugh. Hysterical laughter, she realized, and forced herself to stop. Got to keep control. 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 Bobby looked up to find a row of windows above her head. "Oh," she said out loud. She finally realized what had happened. The bus was on its side. It had rammed into a tree or something, bounced off and toppled onto its side, then skidded to a stop. "How do we get out?" she heard Kimmy call, even though she couldn't see her. In the darkness, she saw a tangle of arms and legs. She heard a girl crying. She heard groans and whispers. "The emergency door in back," someone shouted. Bobby reached for the emergency door and tried pushing it open. It was stuck. "The windows are faster," someone else cried. Kimmy stood up, raised both arms high, struggled to slide one of the windows open. Bobby, bouncing uneasily, tried to do the same. "Can't you get off me?" Corky asked impatiently. "I'm trying, okay?" Bobby replied, not recognizing her own tight, shrill voice. The window slid open. Raindrops hit Bobby's upturned face, cold, fresh, so clean. "Is anyone hurt?" Simmons was calling, a tall shadow in the front. "Is anyone hurt? Who's crying?" Bobby raised herself up, grabbed hold of the window frame. "Is anyone hurt?" The rain was just a drizzle now. The rumble of thunder was low and far in the distance. Bobby pulled herself halfway out of the bus. The whole world was shimmering, glistening, wet, fresh and clean. The bus tires were still spinning. Where are we? Bobby wondered. It all looked so familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Another face appeared. Deborah was emerging from a window closest to the front. "Are you okay?" she called, squinting at Bobby as if she were far away. "I think so," Bobby replied. "You?" "Yeah, my wrist. I think it's sprained, that's all." They pulled themselves out, smiled at each other, buoyed by the fresh air, the cool wetness of being alive. Then, standing on the overturned side that was now the roof, they leaned down into the windows to help other girls escape. Time seemed to stand still. Corky joined her sister, slid to the ground, stretched and yawned as if emerging from a long sleep. The bus headlights, one on top of the other, cut through the air, casting twin spotlights on the jagged tombstones poking up through tall weeds. Tombstones? Weeds? Bobby lowered herself to the ground, her sneakers sinking into the wet grass. Gripping Corky's ice-cold hand, she turned back toward the street. Behind them, a tilted street sign read, "Fear Street." "Oh?" She let go of Corky's hand. "Look!" The bus had careened off the road and slid over the grass of the Fear Street Cemetery. A thick yellow mist, catching the light from the headlights, lingered between the old gravestones, which rose up like arms and legs from the twisting, bending weeds. "We're in the cemetery," Corky said, her voice a whisper, her expression stunned. "How?" "We're only a block from home," Bobby said. "Is everybody out?" Simmons called. He came toward them, taking long strides, his jeans stained at the knees, a bandana wrapped tightly around a bleeding cut on his arm. "You okay?" he asked the two sisters. "Yeah," Bobby told him. "Everyone got out," Simmons said. "No one's hurt too bad." Then Bobby and Corky cried out at the same time, "Jennifer!" Where was Jennifer? In the horror of the crash, in the noise and tilting darkness of it, they had forgotten about her. Jennifer. Bobby saw her again, saw her arms jerk up as she flew out the open bus door, almost as if being pulled out. "Jennifer?" Corky began calling, cupping her hands over her mouth. "Has anyone seen Jennifer?" "Jennifer! Jennifer!" The word buzzed through the group of dazed, frightened girls as they huddled together, squinting against the bright headlights, trying to turn things right side up in their minds, trying to make sense of everything, trying to convince themselves that they were okay, that everything was going to be fine. "Jennifer! Jennifer!" And then Corky saw her, from behind, saw her body sprawled face down, her head resting on the earth in front of an old tombstone, her arms stretched above her head as if she were hugging the stone. "Jennifer!" Bobby shouted. A sudden gust of wind made Jennifer's skirt ruffle, but Jennifer didn't look up, didn't raise her head. Corky and Bobby reached her before the others. Bobby grabbed her shoulders to roll her onto her back. "Don't move her," someone yelled. "Don't touch her. It isn't safe." Bobby looked up to see Simmons standing beside her, staring down at Jennifer sprawled so awkwardly across the old gravesite. "Let's carefully roll her over and get her face out of the mud," he said quietly. They tugged her gently by the shoulders. As they turned Jennifer over, the words etched on the old grave marker came into Bobby's view. Sarah Fear. The dates beneath the name had been worn away nearly beyond recognition. 1875 to 1899. They laid Jennifer gently onto her back. "Call an ambulance!" Heather was screaming. "Somebody, call for help!" Bobby leaned over Jennifer's unmoving form. "It's too late," she said, choking out the words. "She's dead?" Chapter 6. "It's your fault! No!" Corky's anguished cry cut through the air. She dropped to the wet ground beside Jennifer and grabbed her pale, limp hand. "No!" At first, Bobby thought the low wail she was hearing came from her sister, but as the sound grew louder, cutting through the crackle and whisper of the wind bending the ancient trees of the cemetery, Bobby realized it was the siren of an ambulance. Someone in one of the houses across the street must have seen the accident and called for help. A few seconds later, 3 ambulances and a police cruiser pulled into the wet grass, their flashing red lights washing over everyone, making everything seem too bright, the colors all wrong, too frightening, too vivid to be real. The white coats of the paramedics, scrambling through the wet weeds, flashed red and gray, red and gray. The light caught their hard expressions like those in artificial light snapshots, freezing them in Bobby's mind. She knew she'd always remember every somber face, every flash of light, every second of this dark, wet nightmare. Behind the tilted tombstone, Ronnie stood crying, sobbing loudly, her mouth open wide, her eyes round. Kimmy and Deborah huddled around her, trying to comfort her, their faces distorted by the flickers of red light too. The rain had stopped now, leaving the air heavy and cold. On the ground in front of the tombstone, several paramedics worked over Jennifer, speaking softly among themselves, softly but urgently. Gentle hands pulled Bobby and her sister back. 2 young police officers were questioning Simmons, who was shrugging and gesturing to the overturned bus. He appeared very frightened and upset. Radios crackled from the ambulances and the police car. A paramedic leaning over Jennifer spoke rapidly into a cellular telephone. The wind blew a shower of ice-cold rainwater down from the trees. Bobby took a reluctant step closer. Was Jennifer alive? Were they bringing her around? She had to see. The white coats had formed a protective circle around Jennifer. Bobby tried to make sense out of the buzz of low voices. She made her way to just outside the circle, her sneakers sinking into soft earth. One of the paramedics stood up. In the blink of red light, Bobby saw his eyes close, his teeth clench. "She's gone," he said. Another white-coated young man climbed to his feet, shaking his head. "Gone." Radios crackled. Ronnie's sobs cut through the air. "No!" Bobby screamed. Without realizing it, without even realizing she was moving, Bobby pushed past the grim-faced paramedics. She knelt at Jennifer's side, staring down at her pretty, expressionless face. And Jennifer opened her eyes. "Hey!" Bobby cried. "Whoa!" Jennifer blinked and stared up at Bobby. "Hey!" Bobby called. "Hey!" Jennifer blinked again. Her lips trembled. Her dark eyes moved from side to side. "Hey! She's alive!" Bobby called. "Hey!" Corky was holding on to Bobby's shoulders, leaning over her, staring down at Jennifer. Jennifer smiled up at them both. "Hey!" Cheers and cries, urgent voices, the crackling of the radios, a low voice speaking rapidly into a cellular phone. The sounds were drowned out by a rush of wind. It started to rain again. Bobby stared at the flashing colors, the darting yellow cones of light from the flashlights, the pale white beams of headlights. The lights all melted into one and grew brighter and brighter until she had to close her eyes. Jennifer was alive. Okay. She was going to be okay. Her eyes still shut tightly, Bobby said a silent prayer. When she opened her eyes, Jennifer's gurney was being slid gently into an ambulance. 2 more squad cars had pulled up. Several officers stood outlined in headlights, inspecting the overturned bus, shaking their heads. "Lucky no one was killed." The words floated through the air and repeated in Bobby's mind. The rain came down harder, swirled by the wind. The ambulance siren started with a cough. Then the shrill wail corkscrewed through the rustling trees. The ambulance roared away. "How will we get home?" Ronnie was asking, still flanked by Kimmy and Deborah. "What about the game?" Heather asked. "We have to get home," Ronnie insisted. "Will Jennifer be okay? Has anyone called her parents? Someone should call Miss Green. She's probably at the game. They won't play in this rain." Let it rain, Bobby thought, raising her face to it. Let the rain wash everything away. Everything. She turned, startled to see Kimmy standing beside her, a cold, grim expression on her face, her eyes locked on Bobby's. "Kimmy?" Bobby started. "This is all your fault," Kimmy said, speaking through clenched teeth. Her hands were balled into tight fists at her sides. The rain had matted her black hair against her forehead. "Huh? All your fault," Kimmy repeated, continuing to glare at Bobby. "If you hadn't made us turn onto Fear Street." "Now, wait a minute," Bobby cried. "That isn't fair." She realized the other cheerleaders were all staring at her, their faces grim and unhappy, lit by the flashes of red light. "Kimmy, that's not fair," Corky cried, rushing forward to join her sister. Kimmy walked quickly back to Ronnie and Deborah. "That's not fair," Corky repeated. The rain fell harder, making it difficult to see. The ambulance carrying Jennifer was far in the distance now, its siren a lingering cry that refused to fade away. Part 2. The Fall. Chapter 7. The cheers thundered down from the bleachers as the cheerleaders ran out onto the floor. As the 7 girls bounded across the gym, the noise rose and echoed until it felt as if the roof might be blown off. Kimmy led the girls onto the floor, and they immediately went into what they called their clap-clap routine. The girls clapped out a rhythm, and everyone in the bleachers repeated it as loudly as possible. As she clapped, Kimmy stared up at the colorful blur of kids filling the bleachers, spilling out onto the gym floor, standing along the walls. The entire school was at the pep rally. The hand-clapping gave way to foot-stomping. The bleachers quaked and trembled. The rhythm picked up, faster, louder. What a thrill, Kimmy thought. An excited grin spread across her face. What a thrill to perform for the entire school. What a sound! Like an earthquake or the stampede of 1,000 elephants. She knew she looked great in her new uniform. They all did. The maroon and white was so sharp, the skirt so crisp, and the sweater so bright. Their old uniforms had been ruined that night in the rain. But here it was, 2 weeks later, and everything was fresh and new again. And everyone was cheering their lungs out. Well, almost everyone. "Give me a T. T. Give me an I. I. Give me a G. G." What a sound, Kimmy thought, her grin growing even wider as her shiny black hair bounced around her face every time she jumped. They finished the cheer in a wave-like ripple, the girls going down in splits one after the other. Kimmy glanced down the row of cheerleaders, all so happy, so fresh and excited, as if that terrible night had never happened. There was Ronnie, down at the end, radiant, shouting her heart out. Her curly red hair, caught in the bright lights, seemed to glow on its own. How happy she'd been to be back on the squad. And Deborah, normally so cool, so withdrawn, was cheering at the top of her lungs. Only cheerleaders, Kimmy thought, know what this is like. A lot of people put us down. They think we're wasting our time. Or we're out of date or something. But that's because they don't know the special excitement, the special thrill of getting a huge crowd to forget itself and go wild. The cheer ended to raucous shouts and applause. Kimmy peered down the line of girls to see Corky and Bobby do their special double cartwheel. Ugh, she thought bitterly, what show-offs. They really make me sick. With their blonde hair and sweet innocent faces, always prancing around together, trying to make the rest of us look second-rate. I could throw up, I really could. The echoing drums of the marching band brought Kimmy out of her dark thoughts. No, she decided, I'm not going to allow those two to ruin this day. I'm not going to give them another thought. Everyone stood and clapped along as the band played the Shady Side High marching song. I want only good memories of this pep rally, Kimmy thought, clapping as hard as she could. After all, the rally is in honor of us, in honor of how brave we were, in honor of how we survived that terrible night. The band ended its number to wild applause. Corky and Bobby did their cartwheel again, and Kimmy forced herself not to react. The girls all turned to her to begin the next cheer routine. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Kimmy's eye caught Miss Green leaning against the wall of her office and clapping along with them, a big smile on her usually dour face. In a few minutes, Miss Green will name me as a new captain, Kimmy thought. The thought sent a shiver of excitement down her back. It's something I've wanted for so long. I've worked so hard for it, so hard. I'm not knockout beautiful like the other girls. I'm not tall and well built. I don't have straight blonde hair like the Kokorians, or like a movie star like Jennifer. But I'm going to be captain. I'm finally going to be captain. She wished her parents could have been there to see it, to see the pep rally, to see their daughter, to see how exciting it all was. She had begged them to come, but, as usual, they claimed they couldn't get away from their jobs. Just an excuse, Kimmy thought bitterly. Then forced those thoughts out of her mind. Nothing was going to spoil her day. Nothing. Whoa! The routine ended. The band started up immediately. Kimmy turned toward the far side of the gym, and the other girls followed her lead. As the band finished its number, a deafening cheer went up as Jennifer wheeled herself out onto the floor. She was wearing a new uniform too, Kimmy saw. In her hand was a maroon and white pennant with her name embroidered on it, the pennant they had given her in the hospital. She waved it from her seat as she vigorously wheeled herself across the gym. The applause grew and grew until Kimmy felt like covering her ears. Jennifer has been so brave during all this, Kimmy thought, staring at her in her wheelchair, now lined up with the other cheerleaders. So brave and cheerful, even though she might never walk again, even though her life was ruined. Kimmy wondered if she would have been so brave, so smiling, so accepting. Of course, Jennifer had nearly died that night, Kimmy remembered. Everyone had thought she was dead, so in a way she was lucky just to be alive. But how could anyone consider being crippled, perhaps for life, lucky? Kimmy realized that the gym had grown silent. Jennifer had wheeled herself to a microphone and begun a short speech. I'm not good at making speeches, she was saying, her voice so weak and unsteady. I'd much rather be cheering than talking. Nervous laughter rolled down from the bleachers. One of the drummers in the band hit a rim shot. I just want to say thank you to everyone at Shadyside High, Jennifer continued, her voice breaking with sudden emotion. You've all been so good to me, all my friends, everyone, with all the cards and presents and stuff. She waved the pennant. And I just want to tell you all that I feel great. Go Tigers! She pushed back from the microphone, waving her pennant, as the entire school erupted in applause. The band played the marching song again. Maroon and white streamers came flying down from the bleachers. Kimmy wiped away the tears that were rolling down her cheeks. She could feel herself begin to lose control, feel the loud, choking sobs try to force their way up, but she cut them off. This wasn't a sad day, it was a happy day. Everyone was smiling and cheering. This was a celebration that they were all alive. So why did Jennifer's smile make Kimmy feel like bawling? She turned away from Jennifer. It was the only way to keep the sobs down, to keep herself in control. I'm just excited, she thought. Overexcited, I guess. She took a deep breath and held it. Miss Green was approaching them, taking long strides across the gleaming wood gym floor, an intent expression on her face. She wore a maroon and white Shadyside sweatshirt over gray sweatpants. As she neared the microphone, her face flushed. She clasped her hands together behind her back. Miss Green hated public speaking. She seldom spoke at assemblies or pep rallies, and when she did, she always rocked back and forth on her feet and her voice quavered, and everyone could tell she was really nervous. She smiled at Jennifer, stopped, and made a short bow to her. Then, her face nearly scarlet, she stepped close to the microphone. I have an announcement to make, she shouted, her voice echoing off the four walls. It took a while for the crowd to quiet down. She stood silently, waiting until they did. Kimmy could see a muscle twitch in her jaw from nervousness. Poor woman, she thought sympathetically. Kimmy felt the excitement begin to tighten her own muscles. She realized she was smiling with trembling lips. She hoped no one could see them shaking. This is a day of celebration, Miss Green began. We are celebrating the great spirit of these Shadyside cheerleaders, and we are celebrating the spirit shown in particular by Jennifer Daly. The gym grew absolutely silent, so silent Kimmy could hear a car horn honking outside in a parking lot. We are all celebrating today because Jennifer is back with us, Miss Green continued, rocking on the heels of her white high tops. Her courage, her strength, her indomitable spirit are an example for us all. Applause. Now it's time for me to announce a new captain, Miss Green said, glancing at Jennifer, who flashed her an encouraging smile. Kimmy took a deep breath. Her heart was thudding so hard she thought she might pass out. She gave Jennifer a big smile, but Jennifer had turned to stare up into the bleachers. "I have spent many hours thinking about this selection," Miss Green continued, "and I know that the young lady I have chosen will lead the Tiger Cheerleaders with the same courage and spirit that Jennifer Daly has shown." Yes, yes, thank you, Kimmy thought, about to burst. She took another deep breath and let it out slowly. Miss Green cleared her throat and then, speaking loudly and enthusiastically, announced the name of the new cheerleader captain. "No!" Kimmy shrieked out loud. "Please, no!" Chapter 8. Kimmy's cries of protest were drowned out by the applause that rang down from the bleachers. Several of the other cheerleaders, including Ronnie and Deborah, had turned to Kimmy to watch her mouth drop open and her expression turn to shock and dismay. Bobby Kokorin. How could Bobby Kokorin be named cheerleader captain? Unfair, Kimmy thought, feeling her surprise turn to rage. Impossible! After all, Kimmy had been named assistant captain last spring. She had been on the squad for 2 years. She had worked so hard, so hard. So how could she be passed over for a flashy newcomer? Bobby had been on the squad for only a few weeks. She didn't know the school. She didn't know any of the routines. So how could Miss Green and Jennifer have chosen her? Kimmy stood with her shoulders slumped forward, allowing her unhappiness, her anger, to show in her face. She was miserable and upset, and she didn't care who knew it. As the applause died down and Miss Green continued talking, Kimmy glanced down the line of cheerleaders. There was Corky hugging her sister joyfully. Heather and Megan had rushed over to congratulate Bobby, and Bobby had the widest smile on her face, her eyes brimming with happy tears. Yuck, Kimmy thought bitterly. I know why she was named captain, because she's so pretty and I'm not. She's so blonde and skinny and disgustingly all-American. Okay, so I'm not skinny, and I don't have long blonde hair and look like a 17 model. But how could Jennifer and Miss Green do this to me? I'm a better cheerleader than Bobby Kokorin ever will be. I deserve to be captain. Everyone knows I deserve to be captain. Kimmy realized then that her entire body was trembling. Staring up into the bleachers, she felt her anger turn to embarrassment. Everyone is staring at me, she decided. Everyone in the entire school. They're all staring at me. They know I deserve to be captain. They know I've been cheated. She turned and saw Deborah and Ronnie studying her, their faces locked in sympathy, their eyes on Kimmy's face, trying to determine how Kimmy was taking the awful news. Everyone is watching me, Kimmy thought, forcing back the loud sobs that pushed at her throat. Everyone is feeling sorry for me. I've never been so embarrassed. This is the worst day of my life. I'll never forgive Bobby. Never. And I'll never forgive Miss Green either. I just want to disappear. I just want to die. And as bitter thoughts continued to spin through Kimmy's mind, Miss Green finished her remarks and stepped back from the microphone with a relieved sigh. There was a scattering of applause. Kimmy saw Jennifer smiling, always smiling that brave smile of hers, wheeling herself to the side of the gym. And then Bobby led the girls into a circle to begin their final routine. No, Kimmy decided. No way. I can't do this. I'm too embarrassed, too humiliated. I won't do it. I won't. I quit, she decided. I quit the cheerleaders. She had joined the circle, followed the others automatically like some kind of a sheep. But now, as they raised their arms high in the air to begin their routine, Kimmy uttered a cry of disgust and took off, running across the polished wood floor, running as fast as she could, her eyes narrowed, nearly shut, her heart pounding in rhythm with each thud of her sneakers. Were those gasps of surprise from the bleachers? Were those startled questions? A worried buzz of voices? Kimmy didn't care. She was escaping and never coming back. As she reached the double doors to the corridor, running so hard she nearly collided with them, she turned and glanced back. The cheer had begun without her. Corky Kokorin had moved around to close up the circle. I'll pay her back too, Kimmy decided. Jennifer, Bobby, Corky, all of them. She was through the doors and running down the empty corridor when the first anguished sob finally burst from her throat.